straight up, you might have worse genetics than I have for bodybuilding. So I might have a viewpoint where I have a much more positive view of the entire field because I've had more positive feedbacks coming to me because I had better results. And this also means that whenever I see someone who doesn't get those results, as you rightly pointed out, I'm going to have a tendency to try to tell them that it's because they don't work hard enough. Mm-hmm. And this is where you come in and you say, well, that's nonsense, right? Just because you got the results working hard does not mean that someone else must get the same ones. Your genetics might have given you that extra edge. And for this, I agree 100%. The reason why I personally do that is because even though it might make me appear as the villain, I think that this is the necessary mindset where you have at some point to just disregard what we call genetics and just keep pushing forward. And if that takes sucking it up and accepting that even if you did everything you could in your power, it wasn't enough and you can still put it that extra inch, even if it's not realistic, even if it's not something you want to hear, I think that this is what people need to hear.
Because you feel like in that instance, people will end up at a better end result with that mindset?
Yes, I think that when we discuss genetics, and this is one part of your video where I felt it was a little bit lacking, the cornerstone of everything is the mindset, right? It's what you put in. Even if you have the best genetics in the world, if you don't put in the work, you're going to get nothing out of it. And I'm certain that many people have lived through that. Maybe you might have had a talent in the past where you were gifted, but for some reason you didn't really put efforts into it and you never got results that you should have gotten. I know that for me, I was a very talented swimmer. I spoke about that on my channel. And I crushed the other kids, crushed to the point that I stopped caring because I was so good. And then 5 years, 6 years later, I entered a swimming competition with no training, thinking I was the greatest swimmer on earth. And I got crushed. I got destroyed by everyone. I was the worst one. And this is when the discussion about genetics is interesting. I was top of the curve for genetics, number one at my pool. 5 years later, all of the other kids that were lower than me in terms of genetics put in the work, and that work was enough to surpass me. And this is when I speak about the mindset. Now, of course, if two individuals have the same mindset and they put in the same amount of work and they have the same genetics, the guy with the better genetics is going to win 100 times. And I think this is the point where, of course, we agree. I don't want to appear as someone who denies genetics. Of course, they're very important. And this is where I think the unfairness that is perceived by many people enters. I watched your video, but most importantly, I looked at the comments because I think the comments are a good reflection of the way people took the video in. And I saw many people who expressed that frustration of saying, well, I work hard, but I'm being outdone by people who do like half the work. How is that fair? And the answer is, it's not fair. Mm-hmm. Who told you that it was supposed to be fair? It's right. The inherent unfairness of life and genetics that I'm certain you agree with, but that I like to remind people, being a little bit mean sometimes, because once you get that and that mindset is in, your genetics stop mattering, in my opinion.
So a couple of examples there that I think of myself. One, it's funny you mentioned swimming. So my freshman year of high school, I was on the swim team. And I had swam most of my life, just, casually. And so they had different lanes and whatnot. And in my lane, I was the fastest swimmer. So I remember this kid specifically saying, well, you go ahead, you're the fastest. But he was new. And I could literally just tell and watch. I was like, this kid is going to be faster than me by the end of the season because he picked it up so quickly. And lo and behold, he was, right? I mean, it was just like that talent there. And I've said to some people before, and I thought to myself, because I was so obsessive and I put so much into it and looking around me, I did more than everybody else. If I had amazing results, I know myself enough to know I would have been that guy saying, it's because I work harder than you. You guys don't try as hard as me. Like, I know I would have, right? It was only because I put in the work and it wasn't happening. Then I was like, oh, wait a minute, there's got to be something else going on here, So just to say, I do understand the people who have this great, this great talent at something where they're almost oblivious to how much that helps them until, and this is something I was thinking about with you too, until they're either around a huge cohort of like-minded individuals or they train a lot of people. So like people who follow wrestling, like Olympic wrestling and whatnot, like Jordan Burroughs is often thought to be the best wrestler ever. And, or one of the best, I'll say. And he was talking about how he would go to this Olympic training camp and he would see people working just as hard as him. and it just wasn't coming to them, right? But you've mentioned yourself, you don't coach people, and you've
Mhm.
also mentioned that in France, there's not like a big cohort of people like you. You're kind of an outlier in this sense. So I could more so see that mindset where, okay, if you're not coaching people and you're kind of, at least I believe from our last podcast, you mentioned you're almost like a hermit. It's like you work, you have your relationship, and you work out, right? And that's most of your life. You're kind of in this bubble where you don't see maybe the common person so much. You think that's a fair perspective?
I think it's 100% fair. And the reason why, and I've never shared that before, but the reason why I don't coach is because times and times again, I've had people when I was a young kid evolving and putting on muscle who approached me to learn the secret. They wanted to know how I was doing it. And whenever I try to take them under my wing and be like, okay, train with me, I'm going to show you my ways, every single time they lasted 2 weeks. And after
Mm-hmm.
that, they tapped out. And this is when my viewpoint started to develop because I saw that these people didn't have bad genetics. Because how could they have known? They never actually lasted. What I saw instead is that they lacked the mindset. So I never had enough length of time to be able to say, okay, this kid is doing just everything I tell him to do, but he's just not getting the result. And in this case, I cannot blame him. I never got to that point. But I think, and this goes back to what you said to open your segment, that it turned me into one of two types of characters. There's the type that is going to constantly say that it's all about hard work, all about your responsibility, genetics are not that important. And then you have the other type, and the other type is not you, it's other people on YouTube Fitness. And I'm sure that you're going to have names that are going to pop in your head as I explain it. You have some people on this platform who have integrated the idea that they have amazing genetics, and I think because it makes them feel better, they keep spouting it out. But if you look at the result, what it does is it makes other people want to work less because they tell them, well, I mean, I look like this because I have good genetics. You will never look like this. So why do you even bother? I'm the type that will tell you, well, I have average genetics. So why don't you try to put in the work? Maybe I'm a liar. Maybe I'm completely delusional. I'm not saying that's not the case, but look at the result. I think that the intention doesn't matter here. The result is I'm going to have people who are going to get fired up and say, okay, he's saying that he's average. So if I work, I'm going to get the same body. Worst case scenario, they don't, but at least they put in the work, they develop the mindset. I do not want to be the type of person that discourages people. And this is what I liked about your video, by the way. It opened my eyes to the fact that some people do not respond positively to that type of tough love because it makes them feel bad. It frustrates them. And therefore, in this case, and we're going to talk about that later, I have notes about that, there might be a better pedagogical approach so that we can get them to that point without shaming them about the lack of results that, as you said, might just be down to genetics.